Welcome back, everybody, to another video. Do you remember Jeremy? Heck, I don't even know if I do. But today I do want to take a look at the character Jeremy and theorize on who Jeremy might be. Before we dig in, though, I do want to let you know that I do need to summarize a few plot points of the game, so we're going to go a little more in depth than I'd like to, so it's going to be a little longer of a video than usual. Actually quite a bit longer, because in order to make some of the points I want to make and try to explain where I'm coming from with things, it's going to take a little longer to get through some of the plot points that you might already know. I'm going to make some timestamps for you, so like if you already know the Help Wanted lore, you can skip that part and just go right into my next point or my next topic or whatever, so everyone can pick and choose where you want to start this and go from there. So anyway, let's start at the beginning of Jeremy's story that we know from Help Wanted. So at the very beginning of Jeremy's story, we learn from Help Wanted that he works alongside the Tape Girl. We don't know Tape Girl's name, and Tape Girl essentially fills us in on his story through the VR tapes that are strategically placed throughout the game. So essentially though, Jeremy is testing the Help Wanted VR game before release, so he's like a beta tester of the game, and presumably he's the first person to encounter GlitchTrap. So Tape Girl explains that the company was sent some old circuit boards and things to scan that would essentially like speed up the process, so Tape Girl and her coworkers, Jeremy, they don't have to program any pathfinding themselves. It was like a budget thing. The company was like, yeah, we're going to cut costs here or whatever. And so she emphasizes that the like stuff they had to scan in looked really old, but somehow there was usable code on some of it. And so that's kind of where things start spiraling, because it's no ordinary code. All right, so Tape Girl explains how things have started changing while they're working now ever since they scanned that stuff in. And then she mentions that Jeremy told her about that he started appearing. And the he that started appearing is this GlitchTrap digital character, essentially. But over time, she explains like how some morning she'd arrive to work early and Jeremy's already there. He's just standing there in the testing room with the headset on. Another time, Jeremy comes into work and he's complaining about like having real nightmares that are different from just like telling people about a scary dream you had. He's legitimately pale and looks like he hasn't eaten in days, so it's just really messing with him. He talks to the manager doesn't really give him any sympathy, so Jeremy just like goes back to his job, keeps doing his thing. And it's like a VR game that's like pretty scary, right? But Tape Girl explains that like Jeremy doesn't even flinch anymore when he's like testing the game. Nothing at all scares him. And lastly, maybe one of the more important things is that she tells us that he'll just stand there with the headset on like he's talking to someone. So this isn't just like normal game testing. He is interacting with something or someone, which is GlitchTrap. Then one of the most important things, something awful happens with Jeremy, and I don't know like for sure when, but it's sometime after, like essentially one day when Tape Girl arrives, she doesn't understand what she's seen, but she describes the scene as there was something that looked like a Halloween mask laying on the floor. It's then implied that the company has like a guillotine paper cutter, and he uses that to slice off his face, but he's still got the visor covering his head. And it's just really odd. He wasn't sure what she was seeing. He turns in her direction, but she doesn't think that he even knew she was there. And so it's at this point where I need to discuss a few things. First, it's been a commonly held idea that the mask that she sees was actually Jeremy's face, and that Jeremy probably dies or something from this experience not long after. But it's perfectly possible to me that this was actually a real mask and not his flesh. And what mask, you might ask? A mask that we find in the next part of the game. The Help Wanted DLC, Curse of Dreadbear. Though, more specifically, the mask in question is the Vanny mask. Yes, I think that Jeremy is the first owner of this iconic mask, or at least the first character we know of that wore it. Secondly, with the theory I'm presenting, I believe that this particular DLC is actually a prequel of sorts to Help Wanted. The overall story just is showing us how Jeremy came into possession of this mask, and gives us like pieces from his timeline shown throughout the different mini games that we play, similar to Help Wanted 2. Previously, we've thought that this was Vanessa finding the mask or Vanny, both depending on what you believe about Vanny, but I don't think that's the case personally. That's just me. But throughout the Foxy Corn Maze minigame, for example, our character breathes really heavily, and it clearly sounds like a grown man heavily breathing. It's always debatable, of course, so I won't rule out that Vanessa sounds like this when she's breathing heavily. But for this theory, Let's go with the idea that this is Jeremy's experience. Another thing, let's just keep in mind that this Fall Fest is dated 1983, so if it's showing us something from the past, unless Vanessa is alive during this time, it doesn't really add up or make sense that she would be around so long before Security Breach. Rather, it'd be brought to her later on, when the game officially releases, and at that point, we're playing as Vanessa in the main Help Wanted game. Anyway, so I'm not for sure saying the mask was like created or discovered in 1983, but I think the mini-games are showing us that this time period is connected to Jeremy, where GlitchTrap has been in one way or another, leading him into a much more in-control communication method of Jeremy's mind. Like, think back to the times in Ruin where Cassie is unable to remove the Vanny mask even when she tries to. It simply won't come off at certain points in the story. And the same could have happened to Jeremy, and this could be why he uses the paper cutter. It's the only way that he can escape GlitchTrap. But now that I've dragged Cassie into this, it might be a good time to let you know that I think Jeremy is Cassie's dad. I know, I dragged this poor guy into everything now, like all my theories, but Help Wanted 2 just had some crazy things lore-wise that I just can't ignore anymore. For example, one thing is Mystic Hippo telling him to look at your hands, really look at them. It seems super odd since we're in a VR game, why would we need to look at our hands specifically? But if it ties back to the first Help Wanted VR game in some way, it might make a bit more sense why she would say this. But anyway, let's get back to the Dreadbear DLC from Help Wanted. So why would I think this DLC points to Jeremy? Well, the answer isn't as simple as I'd like it to be, but one of my biggest ties to this idea is just due to how FNAF so often likes to tell stories without directly saying anything. They want us to connect things together ourselves through environments, designs, even colors. So the fact that this DLC is Fall Fest themed and shares a ton of visual imagery with minigames from Help Wanted 2 leads me to believe that Cassie's dad frequented Fall Fest, probably as a tech to help maintain rides and animatronics. But regardless, like, we see Dreadbear in both the DLC and as a character in the Fazer Blast Fall Fest in Help Wanted 2. This character appears in both games. We also know it's the same location as the Help Wanted DLC because we have like all the same landmarks. Heck, we even have the same truck parked here. There's also the Jacko animatronics in both games, which also really intrigues me. And just the fact that we're seeing Fall Fest twice in 2 different games makes it seem like this isn't a coincidence. So unless we're getting more new character lore in some upcoming games real soon, I can't help but think that this is the same guy. I have a ton of other little potential evidences like that I could add here, but I'm trying not to make this too lengthy. I'd love to go more in depth, and we may have to do that another time, but I do want to touch on a few more things though that give me a bit more credibility and that tie Help Wanted 2 directly to Security Breach, which gives us more connections all the way back to Help Wanted. The Princess Quest arcades being a big part of that. The one message in Security Breach asks about why the Princess Quest game has been ported to the arcade machine. This person clearly was familiar with the mobile port that we get to play in Help Wanted and was intrigued by the arcade version. From a previous video, I explained how I think that Cassie's dad was the one playing the Princess Quest games, trying to free the princess, and is at least one of the people who also had access to the secret daycare room. This is further strengthened in Help Wanted 2 when we play the arts and crafts level, where we're literally in that very secret room. It seems really significant that this room is shown at all, but more evidence to point towards Help Wanted 1 and 2 being connected is that Cassie brings up the Foxy log ride when we're playing in Ruin. We see 2 different Foxy rides in Dreadbear DLC and Help Wanted 2. So to me, it's no surprise to see these mini games in both VR games if her dad is one of the technicians who would have access to such things. Also, the fact that he's had so many encounters with Sun and Moon in Help Wanted 2, he's like interacting with them multiple times, and likely Security Breach, which ties him directly back to Vanny, in that we see Vanny/Vanessa and Moon working together in Help Wanted 2, and to an extent in Security Breach, which could even reveal at some point how the Vanny mask was passed from Jeremy to Vanessa, or shed more light on just what kind of things Jeremy did while working at different Fazbear locations. Another thing I'm not really going to touch too much on, but let's just quickly remember, we also see older animatronics like Pig Patch and like Funtime Chica, as well as sister location characters, which seems to me to be showing us that Jeremy's story is far from finished. Whether it's just in flashbacks or upcoming stories, or things that will tie together, it does seem to point that he's connected to a lot of Fazbear characters, locations, and events. After all, it's not just William that always comes back. Seems to be a recurring theme for many characters. I am getting a little off topic there, I do apologize, but this stuff is just super exciting to me. The last thing I do want to point out is I was playing the Curse of Dreadbear DLC and I did like 25 or so game overs just to see if I could get this particular game over sentence to pop up on the TV, you know, the one that says "Remember Jeremy." I have not been able to get it to pop up in the Curse of Dreadbear, and I went to AAA Fazbear wiki page, and it has like the list of the normal hub quotes that you can get on the TV, and then the Curse of Dreadbear ones. And "Remember Jeremy" is not one of the ones that you can get on the Curse of Dreadbear hub. I thought that was pretty interesting. If it's Jeremy, he doesn't need to remember himself yet. And then the other thing is there's a quote in the hub, and it is, "It's only a dream." And this one to me really stands out because Tape Girl tells us about how he's having these nightmares, he's having these dreams that actually aren't a dream. And so it's like he's trying to convince himself that it's only a dream, this isn't real. And so it's actually kind of scary if that's what's going on. I just wanted to bring that up quick before we move on. But anyway, I'm going to be referring to Cassie's dad and Jeremy interchangeably at this point, so we'll just call him Jeremy from here on. There are a lot of implications about Jeremy in Security Breach, and I think he plays a massive role in the game, but a lot of the details aren't necessarily fleshed out enough yet for me to touch too deeply on. Man, do I have some crazy ideas. Maybe another time though. But before we continue Jeremy's story about the Vanny mask and being sliced from his face, I now have to summarize the Candy Cadet story for Hw2. We've received a few Candy Cadet stories over the course of the FNAF games. They work as allegories or like even parables, but essentially they connect to FNAF lore by describing events in a story-like fashion. And the story in FNAF Ruin seems to reflect Cassie's journey in the game. And if that's true, I would like to assume that the story in Hw2 that Candy Cadet shares connects to Jeremy. So to summarize it, a young woman, when she was little, is led into a dark forest by a witch, almost gets eaten, she fell for the friendly voice without discernment, was led astray, and was almost thrown into the oven, but escaped with a scar that lasted the rest of her life. When she had grown, she sought revenge on the witch and entered the forest again willingly, this time with confidence of age and experience. The story then goes into how she was greeted by a young boy who led her through jagged trees over a river toward a small house where they told her to rest before killing the witch. The woman was tired and would kill the witch in the morning, so she followed the boy into the house, but the next line of the story is that the oven door closed and the witch would finally have her meal. So the first thing about the story, I don't think gender is relevant in these stories. The story in Ruin for Cassie swapped genders as well, so with like that in mind, let's focus back on our story and try to point out the pieces of the story's puzzle that we can solve. So essentially, Jeremy is tricked by GlitchTrap early on. He listens to the voice without discernment and is led astray. He receives the mask, but he escapes the oven by cutting off the mask from his face, which doesn't kill him, but does leave a scar. So that essentially explains why there's a Halloween mask on the floor that Tape Girl sees. This is when this is happening. Later on in his life, Jeremy gets a job at the Pizzaplex, so Security Breach, as a technician. He's intrigued by the arcades and their creepy and quirky behaviors. He finds the familiar Princess Quest game. He starts playing the arcade games. He eventually gets caught, probably spending most of his time playing arcade games to try and figure out how to glitch them. So he stays after hours to continue his arcade adventures, which also might explain a lot of the weirdly placed empty pizza boxes, food, drinks, and other things around the Plex. He's gotta eat sometime. It also might explain the secret daycare attendant room someone seems to be sleeping in sometimes. Eventually though, Jeremy gets fired or at least has an exit interview. If the duffel bag message is accurate, I don't really know how much we can trust those because we know that Vanessa/Vanny definitely wrote some of them. But it is very likely that at some point when he's left the Plex, whether he got fired or whatnot, he realizes how familiar this all seems, and he's able to connect the dots that this is related to what was after him before. Now remember, there's another part of the Candy Cadet story. The person in the story returns to confront the witch. In other words, Jeremy comes back willingly. There's a big point I need to make here. So it's a little bit of a sidetrack, but I'm one of the believers that just because one ending of Security Breach didn't necessarily happen, all the endings have elements that are true. and could or would have happened. For example, the burn trap ending may not have happened, but it doesn't discredit that it would have happened if things had been able to progress. So personally, I think there's a good chance that burn trap is still around, but that's completely a different theory altogether. What's important though is that a lot of the things from Security Breach endings may be canon. We do see the blob, which confirms at least part of that ending happens, and the Princess Quest ending might happen to some extent as well. Gregory plays Princess Quest 3 and beats it, or somebody does. It might not be him, might be Jeremy, I don't know, but we see Vanny's mask and ribbon on the floor, and that's like the important part. And then there's like the Gregory and Vanessa walk out of the Pizzaplex. This doesn't mean that GlitchTrap is defeated, but it means that Vanessa is freed from his grasp, just like Jeremy was in Help Wanted. There's a scream at the end of Princess Quest 3 that I kind of want to bring up too just quickly. I think it's when we unlock that prisoner door or whatever that GlitchTrap locks someone behind. And that same scream can be heard in Help Wanted 2 after we defeat the weird like spring trap, glitch trap, something trap cutout, whatever it is. And so personally, I just think it symbolizes like part of GlitchTrap's defeat, or like his power, some of his power being taken away from him. It's slightly speculation as well, because honestly, there are so many ways to interpret that scream, but I just wanted to bring it up quick. Regardless, we still need to answer the question, what happens to the Vanny mask after it's left on the floor at the end of Security Breach? First of all, the fact that the blob is still sneaking around in Ruin and an earthquake happens in Ruin could mean that the Pizzaplex still gets shut down for repairs like immediately or soon after Security Breach takes place. We don't really know for sure like when it happened, but I do think we know what became of the mask, and I think Help Wanted 2 gives us the answer to that. So here's how things go. Sometime after the Pizzaplex is closed, Jeremy leaves his home. He leaves a note on the fridge for Cassie, returns to the Pizzaplex, and willingly picks up the mask that we see lying on the floor at the end of Security Breach. It's the same mask that he found in Help Wanted, but he's not under GlitchTrap's influence this time. No, this time he picks it up willingly, and he has the confidence of age and experience with him. So this, like story-wise, to me, that's so cool. There's a lot of counter arguments we're gonna bring up at the end, but it's still just so cool. I know a lot of people say that Jeremy might be Bonnie Bro too, and I don't think that this necessarily proves or disproves that at all. I think it's still perfectly possible that he could be Bonnie Bro. The big argument against it is that Security Breach takes place long after those events, so he'd be a lot older, but I think the Security Breach taking place way in the future is still largely debatable. It's a massive debate in itself. But even if it is true, Jeremy being old isn't an issue, because the Candy Cadet story does emphasize that Jeremy brings the confidence of age and experience with him, which to me means that this dude isn't the youngest. You could even like bring up that Carney talks about, you look old enough to have kids, so age might be fairly significant for that reason. But, you know, then again, you can just counter that by saying, well, he has a little one, Cassie, so he can't be that old. But I still think that all this can work. Again, just a theory. I got a little carried away there, counter-theorizing. I'm sorry, it won't happen again till, like, the end of this video. So, anyway, so he picks up the mask. He returns to the Pizzaplex, picks up the mask, puts it on once again, and is, like, working for GlitchTrap. But this time, he isn't here just to play games. He's out for that glitchy boy blood, and he finally gets to confront his foe. GlitchTrap has been all too ready and eager to finally end this man's reign. This is personal. This is Jeremy, the man who escaped from GlitchTrap, a man who dared interfere with him, a man who tried to destroy his work with the Princess Quest arcades, the man who has come back yet again to take him down. This is personal. And an interesting connection you can make, this explains why the Princess Quest 2 log from Security Breach talks about the arcade game shutting down when Jeremy tries to play it. The log describes it as, Princess Quest 2 won't boot properly. No idea why. Shuts down when I try to play. Like it's personal. Oh, it is personal. It's very personal. GlitchTrap is pissed, man. And so then we get to the worst part of Candy Cadet's tale of woe, where GlitchTrap finally overcomes Jeremy and gets to have his meal. To make Maskbot. Yes, this is where we find out that Jeremy has been physically destroyed and is now forced to give his own daughter the very mask that has haunted him all these years. It's a tragic twist, but not all hope is lost. The other current ending shows us that GlitchTrap gets destroyed by Vanny, which leads to a ton of other questions, such as why is Jeremy able to trade the Vanny mask if he gave it to Cassie? Wouldn't this discredit the whole ending? And to that I say, not necessarily. Just like other FNAF games with multiple endings, the ending may not play out exactly like this, but Steelwool did confirm that this is the end of GlitchTrap with their interview with the YouTuber FNAF. So Jeremy's efforts were not in vain in one way or another. I don't want to speculate too much though, as we don't have games after this quite yet to show us what's next, but it does seem that one way or another, GlitchTrap doesn't succeed. But I know for certain that this is likely not the end of William, or even Jeremy. I always come back. Yes, indeed you do, but whenever you do, you can bet there's going to be more people like Jeremy to take you down again. So in a nutshell, Jeremy is overtaken by GlitchTrap and Help Wanted. The DLC shows us some of his memories to fill us in on who we're playing as, preparing us for Help Wanted 2's big reveal, but also cluing us in on a character who was present at the Pizzaplex as well, so we can fill in other plot gaps in Security Breach that we've been wondering about. He's also able to remove the Vanny mask, but he's scarred from it for life. He then works at the Pizzaplex and discovers the arcade secrets and realizes that the same virus that almost destroyed him has made itself comfortable here, using its new victim or victims. And so at some point, he resolves to destroy GlitchTrap and come back to the Pizzaplex. So when Gregory completes Princess Quest 3, or somebody does, then Vanessa is freed or whatever, and the mask lies on the floor. Pizzaplex, for whatever reason, is shut down, and Jeremy returns, picks up the mask, and begins his work for GlitchTrap. But things don't quite end up how he hopes, and he becomes Maskbot, passing the mask on to his daughter. But somehow is able to aid in GlitchTrap's defeat at some point, which might even mean that whatever help he is not GlitchTrap, but is another entity arguing with that mimic code in Ruin. What happens next, I definitely don't know. The possibilities are like endless. So here's a few counter-arguments we can think about to keep us thinking outside of just one theory. There's quite a few counter arguments that we could make. And like one question right off the top of my head is just, if Jeremy's still wearing the headset after he cut the mask off of himself, was he still talking to GlitchTrap at that point? We could also bring up that the Fall Fest date in Dreadbear is 1983, whereas the one in Help Wanted 2 is 1970. That is a 13-year difference, and I think it's fair to bring that up. Also, my heavy breathing thing, you know, in the maze, that could literally be anyone. You could also argue that the Dreadbear DLC isn't a prequel. We don't even know what happened to Tape Girl for sure, so we don't know for sure if Vanessa is Vanny. The voice does sound different in Help Wanted versus Security Breach. And yet another, it's weird that we play as the princess finding the Vanny mask in Princess Quest, so that doesn't really make sense if Jeremy is like going into the maze, because you go into the maze in Princess Quest and it shows that, but maybe that's like just symbolic. I don't know. It's just something you could bring up as like a counter argument. You could also bring up a lot of the tie-ins could be pointing us towards a completely different character. I acknowledge that. I know this isn't a perfect theory. Another thing, we also don't know Gregory's backstory yet. GGY book seems to be a canon book, in my opinion, because we literally see some of the things in Security Breach that the book talks about. But if that book is canon, there is a point in which he's under GlitchTrap's control, and it's possible that he's still pulling strings behind the scenes. And as for like the screams in Princess Quest, those might not be GlitchTrap's defeat, but rather his triumph. It could be a victim screaming. And also keep in mind that the focus of Help Wanted was letting him out. So it's possible he wants out of the arcades as well, and that the princess is like the character tricking Jeremy into releasing GlitchTrap, which would imply that he almost escapes, if not for like Vanny or whatever. But that brings up a whole bunch of other questions too. Just another theory for someone to look into. Of course, the blob existing could be proof that none of the other endings are canon in Security Breach, so you can also take the story that route, which also has a lot of evidence supporting that. And I guess lastly, the fact that Vanny's mask looks different than the mask Cassie and her dad use. Like Cassie states in Ruin when she sees Vanny that, hey, like, that's my mask, or something like that. And I don't know if that's them trying to tell us that, yes, it is the same mask, even though it doesn't look like it, but it does clearly look different, and it still looks different when we see Vanny in Help Wanted 2, so I don't know what that means. Because if it's not Vanny's mask that's on the floor, then who was wearing it during Princess Quest? Maybe Cassie's dad / Jeremy's story goes even further back, and that's when he's freed from the mask. So maybe when he's still wearing the visor in Help Wanted after he cuts the mask off, maybe he's still partially under GlitchTrap's control. I don't know. I don't have all the answers. I just want to put this out there for people to chew on, expand on, let me know what they think, come up with your own theories, tag me in them. I want to watch it. I want to know like everyone's perspectives on things. I think this is just, there's so much out there right now and we're just getting overwhelmed with lore and we're not getting enough like pieces put together. So if we can keep getting more pieces put together, we can tackle more and more lore, and it just makes the story so cool just to like see different things fall into place. Anyway, I apologize for the super long video, but I had to share this. And so that's just like where I'm at with the lore. I know my thoughts will probably change in a day or two because you can shoot this one pretty full of holes in the story. But yeah, anyway, that's all I've got. Have a good one.